Hello there. Today I decided I deserved some champagne. So what I've got to talk to you about is a little half bottle of Billecart-Salmon Brut Reserve non-vintage there. Very much looking forward to this. So Billecart-Salmon are a relatively small, very highly respected champagne house from Mareuil-sur-Aÿ. So located almost at the confluence of the best areas of Champagne. We're on the southern slopes of the Montagne de Rheims in the Marne Valley, just north of the Côte de Blanc. The house was created in 1818 as a result of the marriage of Nicolas François Billecart and Elisabeth Salmon. And today, the seventh generation of their family is in control of the company. So that is Mathieu Roland-Billecart, who is the current CEO. And the Billecart family have a majority holding in the company, with the family-owned Frey group owning a minority stake as well. And the Freys, the people who own La Lagune in Bordeaux, they own La Chapelle and Jaboulet in the Rhône, and they have a property Courtenay in Burgundy. Now in the vineyard, Billecart-Salmon uses biodynamic principles wherever possible and doesn't use chemical pesticides or herbicides at all in their estates. Yields are kept low to ensure fruit quality. And although I say they're a small house, they have about 100 hectares of their own vineyard out of a total of 300 hectares that they work with. And these vineyards are spread across 40 of the villages, the crus of Champagne, with the majority of the grapes they use coming from within a 20-kilometre radius of the town of Epernay. And this is the region where most of the best Grand and Premier crus for Pinot Noir, Meunier and Chardonnay are located. So yes, they're taking fruit both from the Montagne de Rheims, the Valley of the Marne, and the Côte de Blanc. As is normal for Champagne, the fruit here will be hand-picked. At the winery, it's whole bunch pressed to try and give a clean juice, and then that juice is actually racked twice, which was a practice that was quite revolutionary when Billecart-Salmon first adopted it, but now is used by other producers as well. Fermentation goes on at low temperatures in stainless steel tanks, and the house will apply a malolactic conversion when they feel it's necessary. They don't either block it or ensure it goes through. They prefer to evaluate each wine individually to determine if it'll enhance the final wine. And it's a selective approach, aiming to be able to craft wines with complexity, elegance, refinement and balance. My belief is the largest amount of fruit for this wine will have been from the 2019 vintage. And there's a balance here of 40% of Meunier from the Vallée de la Marne and the southern slopes of Epernay. There's 30% of Chardonnay in the blend, which they say is sourced from the best crus in Champagne. Without further defining that, probably mostly from the Côte de Blanc, and 30% of Pinot Noir from the Montagne de Rheims and what they describe as the Grande Vallée de la Marne. Being described as a reserve, the blend here has a large proportion of older reserve wines. They say between 50 and 60%, so that is quite a large proportion. And they also say that this particular blend contains wines from 13 different vintages. And this is labelled as a brew, but they do say they try and keep dosage low and will only apply a dosage if it's absolutely necessary. The wine's been blended and has done its second fermentation in the bottle. The wine, prior to Degorgement, will have spent 30 months with the dead yeast lees lying in the bottle, breaking down there and imparting sugars and proteins into the wine. It gives it more richness, a little more weight and a more rounded palate feel. Now it's worth realising that Billecart-Salmon are currently changing this particular cuvee. Whereas this is labelled as Brut Reserve, the wines that are made from the 2020 vintage, they're moving on to labelling it simply as La Reserve. And part of the changes there is actually to reduce the dosage, extra brew level. And there's several more improvements in terms of the cuvee, aimed at increasing its complexity through longer aging. So whereas this has spent 3 months on lees, the La Reserve will spend 50 months on lees. So substantially longer aging in bottle. There will be a higher percentage of reserve wine used, and some of the wines will have been fermented in oak. Now, Billecart-Salmon's reserve of old wines is already stored in oak barrels in their deep chalk cellars, but the use of a portion of oak fermentation will add extra complexity to the wine. And other changes will see an increase probably up to about 15 vintages going into the blend. So this is a cuvee that's going through some changes at the moment. There's a note on the label that says this was degorged in May 2022, so counting back the 30 months, that's why I believe the majority of the wine will be from the 2019 vintage. But it is worth considering that Billecart-Salmon say that from the half bottle format, you probably only want to leave the wine to age for 1 or 2 years before drinking it. So in fact, this has had just over 3 years since it's been degorged. So it might be that bit fuller and richer. It might have a little bit of what they call a goût anglaise. So let's see, shall we? First thing I'd say is I've been talking for a bit, and there's still a fine bead of bubbles, very slowly rising there. Just give it a swell there, see what aromas we can release there. And the aromas are particularly yeasty. There's a sort of a doughy, maybe a slight mineral note, a salinity perhaps. But yeah, it's rich, there's almost a creamy note, so brioche is quite a nice way to describe the aroma there. There are perhaps some hints of citrus, maybe just some delicate floral perfumes, hints of lime flower, maybe a slight gingery spice top note there. So let's have a taste. On the palate, that is very dry. I suspect that even though that's labelled as brew, that's probably closer to an extra brew in terms of its dosage. And that's really emphasising quite a fine, lean, mineral crispness. And there is a mid-weight, a roundness and a richness. And there are notes of brioche, there are notes of apple, hints of citrus, lemon and lime. But actually, all that's being reined in, being given length and quite a linear style by this really fine mineral acidity. And it's an interesting contrast between the fine, crisp, mouth-watering notes on the front palate that really are driving the finish forward, but also that rounded, rich, slightly creamy brioche note that's supported by the wine's fizz there. Interestingly, this seems like a lean, elegant wine, and yet it still has a lovely presence, a richness and a complexity. I don't think it suffered from the fact that it's 3 years since degorgement. The flavours are still lasting very well in my mouth. In terms of a score, I think that this deserves something in the low 90s, 91, maybe 92. The wine has a beautiful balance, and there's a real lingering elegance there as well. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed it, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that way also you can set yourself an alert and you can be notified every time I publish a new tasting. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, it'd be fantastic if you consider passing it on to them. I'd be very grateful for that. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, do please pop them in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think about Billecart-Salmon, if there are any other non-vintage champagnes you think I should look at, any other comments you have about my tastings, or anything else concerning that. I will, of course, leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this particular wine. So do follow that link and it'll show you where the wine's available in your market and at what price. So thank you once again for joining me, and I do hope that you'll manage to make some time in the very near future and come and join me for another tasting. Until then, bye for now.